It is a wonderful diet, but there is nothing about it that makes me think about weight loss right away. Hello, I'm Dr. Sam, this is Dr. Sam's Health. Today I continue my diet review series and I would like to continue talking about the Mediterranean diet. I've already made 2 videos about this wonderful diet. By the way, I do believe that this diet is truly wonderful. In the very first video I've spoken about the composition of this diet, the definition of it, just because this is a diet that is determined by the geographical location. So the countries of the Mediterranean Sea basin, and depending on the country, this diet can be quite different. But at the same time, they have a number of things in common, and these things are associated with better health outcomes. So we spoke about this diet being pretty much plant-based, with some addition of some red meat, some chicken, some seafood. Actually, seafood is very area-specific part. And of course, this diet is quite balanced. It includes certain amount of saturated fat, but also a number of omega-3 fatty acids, multiple micronutrients that are very important for our health. And in the second video, I spoke about the health outcomes, and I think I've made it abundantly clear that this diet is associated with much better health. We spoke about the incidence of cancers, we spoke about the cerebrovascular health, cardiovascular health, number of metabolic parameters, and so on. And we've got a lot of research data showing that this diet is quite healthy. Today, I would like to talk specifically about one particular effect of this diet, which is weight loss. So the big question for me, for somebody who has published a book about weight loss, is whether this diet, being so healthy, whether it is associated with weight loss or not. And we're going to dissect it today. And before we get into that, I would like to make my regular disclaimers, which are: I'm a medical doctor, I'm a practicing physician, but it doesn't mean that anything I speak about on my YouTube or on my website, drsamshealth.com, by the way, check it out, is medical opinion. You should not take anything I say as a medical advice. Speak to your healthcare provider if you have any particular medical issues, and the opinions that I express are solely mine. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of my governing bodies, my colleges, universities, my specialty, which is psychiatry, and so on. Okay, now when we're done with the disclaimers, we can get to the issue at hand, which is whether this diet is associated with weight loss or not. And I will start with the following. In my educated opinion, this diet should not be associated with weight loss unless you're in a consistent caloric deficit. That is the key principle of weight loss. I've been talking about it for ages. It is outlined in my book, The Rational Diet, which is also based on this principle. But I still included this diet, by the way, in the book, just because this dietary pattern is great. But again and again and again, in order to lose weight, you need to be in caloric deficit. And there is nothing about this otherwise very healthy diet that screams weight loss. So if you are not in a caloric deficit, if you consume all this wonderful macro and micronutrients in excess, so you have lots of olive oil, which is super calorific, not super healthy, lots of nuts, lots of starchy vegetables, some salmon, olives, you likely will gain weight. So that is my opinion, and obviously nobody cares about my opinion because we all are looking for good research. So let's talk about research. I've got 2 research articles to discuss today. One of them is a fantastic network meta-analysis of randomized trials. So this is the article that is published by Long Yi and co-authors in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I actually use this article a lot in my book just because it is so good. So what they have done, they have found 121 randomized controlled trial that would be dedicated to comparison of different aspects or outcomes of various diets. They have included data on 14 popular named dietary programs, and obviously it's hard to analyze it, so they have merged diets into several categories. So there would be something that I would call like dietary advice, which is a control diet. They would have low carb diets, low fat diets, and something they call moderate macronutrients, which are the diets that kind of imply consumption of different things in moderation. And the Mediterranean diet is included into this category. So what they have come up with is that any diet, first of all, leads to some significant weight loss in comparison to the no diet, no specific change in dietary pattern. They specifically compare it to the dietary advice. So they have a very nice infographic here that pretty much outlines their findings. And they showed that low carbohydrate diets actually are associated with the highest amount of weight loss over the course of the trials. Low fat are just like lagging behind a little bit. And the category, which is moderate macronutrients, including the Mediterranean diet, are somewhere in between. So they are associated with approximately 3 kilograms, or around like 6.5, 7 pounds of weight loss over the course of clinical trials, which is obviously much better than no diet change. But I've got two issues with this study. Not with the study, just with the findings. First, this study does not include specifically Mediterranean diet. It includes multiple studies, multiple diets that are similar to the Mediterranean diet, and they group the Mediterranean diet into one category of moderate macronutrients. That's one. And second, the data, they do not take into consideration energy restriction. And that's a little bit problematic because my major postulate is that you cannot lose weight unless you're in a caloric deficit. And I think we have to search further. And if we do go a little bit further, we can find another meta-analysis by Catherine Esposito and co-authors, which is called Mediterranean Diet and Weight Loss, Meta-Analysis of Randomized Controlled Trials. This article, it's a wonderful review article. Unfortunately, it's a little bit old, not super old, but it was published in 2011. And obviously, it's another meta-analysis. It's very focused on specifically weight loss and specifically Mediterranean diet. It's quite comprehensive. It includes 16 randomized controlled trials, which is also a good thing. I mean, it's not an observational study, it's a randomized controlled trial. They have 19 arms and approximately 3,500 participants, which is way less than the previous analysis. I mean, the article that I've just discussed, which is much newer and includes much more different diets. This one is very specific. Since it was published 10, 11 years ago, the problem is that it might not include some more recent randomized controlled trials, but I think that for the sake of our discussion, this is more than enough. It's specific enough, precise enough, and it gives us good answer to the question that we are trying to answer. So their conclusion is that the Mediterranean diet is associated with significant weight loss. The most important, most beautiful part of this particular study is that they compare the diets or the studies that have taken into consideration energy restriction and those that haven't. And that is quite a story. So here on page 10, we've got this wonderful forest plot of the variety of studies. And you can see that majority of studies are actually not associated with any weight loss. And only, I would say, 4 or maybe 5 studies are. And they have a wonderful table here when they do something we call sensitivity analysis. Then they break all the studies into some categories and comparing the outcomes of these studies while taking into consideration various factors. And the very first line in this table, or 2 lines, are related to energy restriction. And what they show here is that when energy restriction was taken into consideration or was introduced as part of the dietary approach, people would have lost approximately 3.88 kilos, or almost 4 kilos, or around 7 pounds over the course of the trial. The good thing is that the weight loss is somewhere in the vicinity of 3-4 kilograms of weight lost over the course of the clinical trial on average in comparison to the control diet, which, by the way, is almost the same number as the one that we have at the newer meta-analysis, network meta-analysis. And if there was no energy restriction, people would lose only less than a kilo, like 1.5 pounds or 0.67 kilos over the course of the trial. And there is also a confidence interval that covers 0, which means that this outcome is not actually statistically significant. And that is pretty much my point. So this study has actually clearly shown that if you are in a caloric restriction and following the Mediterranean diet, you are going to lose weight. If you are not in a caloric restriction and you are just following this diet, likely you will not lose weight. So that brings me to the conclusion of this video, which is, as I said, this is a wonderful diet. It is associated with wonderful health outcomes. As a doctor, I highly recommend people trying to replicate this nutritional approach. But if you want to lose weight, following this diet would not be enough. Yes, it would bring you some wonderful metabolic outcomes and changes, but you need to be in a consistent caloric deficit in order to lose weight. If you are not in caloric deficit and following the Mediterranean diet, likely you will not lose weight. And if you need any help, check out my book, The Rational Diet, or my website, drsamshealth.com. I've got a number of tools there, my blogs, and the link to the book. So that was everything I want to talk about today. I think we have given enough attention to the Mediterranean diet. Maybe I'll make a cooking video, making something nice in the Mediterranean style, like Greek salad. But I think we can switch or start switching to other diets in this diet review series. Thank you for watching. I wish you all the very best and see you soon.